Dinner Disaster. Chapter 1. The Mall Incident. 9 p.m. Elmore Mall is empty as the crowd disappeared shortly ago. Only Nicole and Richard give a sign of life in the quiet ambience. Nicole just went through another painful transformation and has reached her upper limit again. She forgot to take in her medicine and tried to hunt down Felicity earlier, who made a big mistake by commenting about Nicole's crimes when she was already transforming. Felicity shows herself in the entrance of the mall, where a big group of officers just left in panic. Nicole is panting and bent over after she pushed away her husband. Richard takes advantage of her small moment of sanity and calls the home phone. Anais picks it up, and her eyes widen when she hears her father speak up in a stressed and scared voice. "Anais, are you there?" "Yeah? What happened, Dad?" Richard turns his head and sees Nicole shivering while she clearly starts losing her mind again. "There's no time to explain," Richard says. "Listen, your mother forgot to take her medicine. Your mother forgot to take in the medicine. Please, can one of you bring it quickly?" Oh no. Anais goes silent for a brief moment. Gumball is going right now. He'll be there in any minute." "Great, thanks, dear." Richard has no option than immediately hanging up when his savage wife rises and charges straight for Felicity, who paralyzes out of fear. In the meantime, Gumball rushes towards the mall on his bike as fast as he can. He puts some of the medicine packages in his pocket and narrows his eyes while he makes his way through the busy traffic. He feels stressed as he fears that he might arrive too late. "Please, Mom, don't let it get out of hand again," he thinks when he gets off his bike, and he runs into the mall without looking behind him. Nicole wants to pounce, but gets stopped by Richard before she can even jump. He grabs her ankles and pulls her away from Felicity with all his might. Nicole furiously tries to bite, but doesn't manage to reach him. Her claws scratch deeply into the floor's tiles when the big bunny drags her away. She then suddenly kicks him on his chest with one of her hind paws, and he immediately releases her. He falls over and fears the worst when Nicole turned him into her new target. He gets rescued by his son, who arrived just on time. Gumball quickly hands over the package to his father while sweating, and Richard takes a leaf of the herb out of it. Gumball shrieks in fear when he sees his mother almost biting his father in his throat, but Richard manages to move away, and Nicole bites his paw instead. No matter how terrible the pain is, it was Richard's intention, as he was holding the herb in that paw earlier. Nicole releases his paw and has no other choice but swallowing the herb, which got stuck in between her teeth. The medicine luckily works fast enough as Nicole visibly starts calming down. Her fur turns back to normal, short and soft, her eyes stop glowing, and her fangs shrink. She then takes a few steps back, looks at her husband and son with a shocked expression, and passes out before she can even speak. Richard and Gumball rush to her, and Richard smiles at his son when he takes her in his arms. "Oh, well done, champ," Richard says while sighing in relief. "I'm glad you're okay, Dad. This was so close," says Gumball. "I know. Your mother might need some help with remembering the meds." "Definitely, but gosh, it's been a while since it happened, hasn't it?" "I guess that was the scariest thing about it." Gumball carries his bike as he follows his father, who holds his mother in his arms while walking to the parking lot. Richard stops for a second when he gets past Felicity, who only just calmed down. "And as for you, Miss Barham," he says, "I hope this was a clear lesson." I, I, I don't know what to say," says Felicity. "Well, you're welcome. For saving you from these claws," says Richard as he frowns. He sternly continues walking, and Gumball gives Felicity an angry glare before returning to his father. Richard carefully puts Nicole in the backseat of the car and gets in the front with Gumball. They worriedly look each other in the eye before Richard starts the engine and drives home. Darwin immediately took care of his adoptive father's wounded paw when they arrived home. Nicole is laying on the couch and slowly wakes up when Anais calls her. She sits down next to her exhausted mother and offers her a cup of tea. Nicole declines as she suddenly starts remembering all that happened. Gumball and Anais look at each other with a worried expression when they see their mother turning around and lowering her head. Richard shows himself out of the kitchen and smiles at his wife to show her everything is okay, but Nicole's eyes suddenly tear up and she starts crying helplessly. Her body trembles in shock as tears flow down her cheeks. She then curls herself up like a feral feline and hides her face with her paws. Richard sits down next to her on the couch when he sees her shoulders shaking, indicating she is still sobbing. He whispers to his kids to leave them alone for a moment and puts his paw on his wife's back when they went upstairs. He strokes her back until she calms a bit down. Nicole is exhausted. She is sick of having to deal with her condition, but also sees last incident as a lesson to carefully remember her medicine. But now, she's too tired to think about anything and falls asleep after some moments. Richard sighs in relief and wraps his arms around the blue feline. He picks her up and carries her to bed. He then eventually goes to sleep too after having tucked in the kids. Before falling asleep, Richard suddenly thinks of something. Does he feel less scared? It might be because these incidents occur more often, he thinks. But then he changes his mind when he remembers the terrific scene from tonight. Seeing his wife going through such a painful and horrifying transformation was even scarier than her attack. Richard starts feeling a bit nervous, but calms down when he sees a package of the medicine on Nicole's bedside table. It's gonna be fine, he thinks to himself. Chapter 2, Birthday Bunny. Sunday, 1 p.m. Nicole breathes deeply when she cuts a carrot in the kitchen. It's the day of Anaïs's birthday, and she is busy with preparing dinner for tonight's guests. She and Richard recovered a bit from the mall incident, and Anaïs was sweet enough to make a schedule for her mother so she couldn't quickly forget her medicine. Nicole really wanted to do something in return, and decided to let Anais choose who could come over. She didn't really mind her daughter's choice, even though she had some doubts at first. She now tries her best to prepare the best dinner ever. Anais deserves it, she thinks, while she grabs some more vegetables from the fridge. Richard enters the kitchen and hugs his wife from behind. "What are you preparing, dear?" he asks. "Oh, just one of Anaïs's favorite dishes. She says she really enjoyed the Japanese veggies I prepared last time, and now I'm adding a bit of a rabbit's delicate," she says. "Which is?" "Carrot. All bunnies love carrots, right?" They're mad at me." "Because they're too healthy?" Nicole smirks at her husband, who laughs in response. She then kisses him on the cheek before he makes his way into the living room again. Anais can't be any more excited when her brothers help her with decorating the dining room. Richard already feels tired after removing the fallen leaves at the front door and now settles on the couch. Nicole is glad to have started preparing dinner on time as she is almost finished. She lets the vegetables cook at a low pace on the stove and grabs a package from the fridge. She gets a sharp knife from the cutlery drawer and wants to start slicing, but suddenly freezes when she sees a whole tuna revealed from the package on the counter. She only then realizes she indeed was planning to prepare a foolish Japanese dish for Anais. She puts the knife down and stares at the fish. Her attention goes to its shiny scales, and they remind her of the time where she saw Kayla's pet fishes. Kayla, a white dog humanoid, once was Nicole's enemy as she was on Brandon's side, but she eventually came to a new understanding with the blue cat. Guilt starts rising within Nicole. She is the one who had killed Kayla's husband, Jay. Even though it wasn't fully Nicole's fault and Kayla had forgiven her, she still feels terrible. The tuna on the plate in front of her reminds her too much of these bad memories, as she even had eaten Kayla's packed fishes back then. She sternly turns around and closes her eyes. She can't do this. She can't kill another fish. But it's killed already, she suddenly thinks. Her mind becomes restless, and she starts feeling mixed emotions, even anger. She holds onto the kitchen counter with her paws and tries to stay upright as her body shivers. She is disgusted by her condition when she feels that the smell of the fish makes her hungry. Defeated by her instincts, she quickly turns around and devours the tuna within seconds while drool drips from her mouth. She pants for a second, then continues preparing the rest of the dinner with narrowed eyes. Her mind is restless and full of thoughts, but she does not let them distract her. I'm such an animal, she eventually thinks. 7 p.m. Anais is happier than ever and thanks her mother for the dinner. Granny Jojo and Louie, who arrived earlier, now have a chat with the birthday bunny. Anais also invited Chimera, the mixed toy shark creature. Nicole didn't even mind him coming over too, as she now knows he doesn't mean any harm at all. Besides, she's feeling too worried about her own sanity at the moment. She is so worried that she didn't even respond to Granny Jojo's mocking roast. Richard's mother is beyond surprised and looks the blue feline in the eye with a confused expression. Is everything okay, Nicole? She asks. Yeah? Why do you ask? Because you didn't even react on my comment about the hyperactivity of your sons. Granny Jojo points at Gumball and Darwin, who drank too much sugary soda and are running around the living room while trying to tackle each other. Are you gonna do something about this? Nicole sighs and slowly gets up from the dining table. She approaches her sons with low shoulders, not showing strong authority like she usually has. She snaps her fingers and the two boys freeze while looking at their mother. You two, cut it out immediately. But we were having so much fun, says Darwin. Yeah, Mom, please. You know how energetic sugar makes us. Look, I don't have the energy to constantly tell you off, so please get back to the table. But Mom, please! Can we at least play a few more minutes? Nicole feels more impatient than before when she sees Jojo looking at her with a judgmental expression and shaking her head slowly in aversion. The blue cat mother then clenches her paws into fists and turns her head to look her sons in the eye. Bleep! Nicole can't take it anymore and snarls while interrupting her adoptive son. I said cut it out! Gumball and Darwin turn silent in astonishment of how aggressive and sudden their mother dealt with their disobedience. Darwin, being extremely sensitive, tries to force his teeth to stay inside and runs back to his chair in fear. Gumball lowers his ears and looks at his angry mother in the eye, with big pupils before returning to the table as well. Nicole sighs and her ears drop when she sees the two boys sitting at the table in silence. She then sits back down too. What was that, Nicole? Asked Joanna. What was what? That? Your voice. What was all that growling about? I prefer not to talk about it. You don't? Well, I think it's something important to address. It seemed kind of unsettling, don't you think? I said I don't want to talk about it. Richard notices Nicole avoiding eye contact with his mother and fears that his wife is forcing her rage to stay inside. He moves his chair in between the two and immediately changes the subject. Jojo eventually gets in conversation with Richard, and Nicole takes her chance to escape to the kitchen. Gosh, that was so close. After a while, when all guests left, Richard and Nicole hand over their gifts to their daughter. Gumball and Darwin sit down next to Anais on the couch and watch in admiration as she opens Richard's gift. A bright, warm smile appears on her face when she holds the little science kid in her paws. Nicole winks at Richard when he gets hugged by the little pink bunny. Anais then opens her mother's gift, and her pupils turn big as she chuckles out of joy. She reveals a set of little clothes for Daisy the donkey, her favorite plush from the wrapping. Anais then hugs her mother, showing her how much she loves this gift too. "Thank you so much, Mom," she says. "You're very welcome, dear." Nicole then suddenly starts feeling a stabbing pain in her stomach. She begins shivering a bit, and the fur on her back rises. Anais keeps holding her mother tightly with her head against her chest until she suddenly can clearly hear her heart racing. Anais loses her grip and looks at her mother, whose pupils are now constricted. Chapter 3: Lights Out. Anais grits her teeth in fear when she notices the beginning phases of her mother's monstrous transformation. She feels mad because of her grandmother, who just couldn't keep her mouth shut and prevent Nicole from getting triggered. Nicole is terrified and tries to hide that she's feeling dizzy. Anais, immediately wanting to take action, supports her mother while they walk into the bedroom. Nicole can't handle standing straight any longer and almost collapses when she sits down on the bed. Anais quickly searches in the drawers of the closet, but doesn't manage to find the medicine and gets extremely nervous by this. "They're on the bedside table." Nicole points at the little wooden table, and Anais immediately grabs the small package from on top of it. Nicole's claws unsheath as she holds her head, and it starts hurting badly again. Anais is extremely stressed when she hands over a leaf of the herb to her mother, who growls in agony. Nicole takes in the herb and turns her head away from her little daughter. Anais steps aside and is more worried than ever when she sees her mother panting heavily. "Don't... Are you okay, Mom? Please, I beg you, stay away." Anais takes a step backwards and sighs a relief when Richard comes into the room and comforts the suffering blue feline. Nicole calms down as the medicine starts to kick in and takes a deep breath. "Thank you for your patience." "Any time, dear," says Richard. "And I'm so sorry for giving you a scare on your own birthday." "No worries, Mom. I really want to help you," says Anais. Nicole sighs. "I appreciate that, sweetie, but please, be careful next time." Anais nods and embraces her mother's hug. The three make their way into the living room and settle on the couch with Gumball and Darwin. Anais sits on her mother's lap while wrapping her arms around her. Gumball and Darwin keep a bit of distance due to them still being shocked by Nicole's outburst earlier. Richard puts on a movie of Anais's choice and sits down too. A bright smile appears on the little bunny's face when Daisy the donkey shows herself on the screen. They all watch the movie together until suddenly the television goes black. It has only been a few minutes, and Richard gets up with an extremely confused look on his face. Nicole carefully puts Anais next to her and walks into the basement. While Richard tries to find any possible causes on the television itself, Nicole opens the electric regulating box. She checks all the switches, but to her surprise, everything appears to be in order. Suddenly, all lights shut down too and turn the house dark. The kids, who are in the living room, tightly hug each other as they didn't expect this. Nicole makes her way up the stairs out of the basement again after she closed the regulating box. She and Richard make eye contact for a brief moment, and she exits the house while staying silent. She checks the front wall and crouches down, only to see that the main electric wire got dug up and cut. She narrows her eyes and bares her teeth. "Richard? You might want to come and look at this." Richard curiously walks to his wife and gasps when he sees the broken wire. "Oh no! What are we gonna do now? Getting it repaired?" he asks. "That costs way too much money. Who could have done this?" Richard frowns and walks to the backyard, where he suddenly hears rustling in the bushes. It's too dark to see anything clearly, but Richard's eyes widen when he suddenly hears someone chuckling. Nicole follows her husband into the dark shadows and then sees a known figure showing himself from the bush with giant gardening scissors in his hands. He is a short rainbow humanoid who wears a purple tie. He can't stop giggling when he drops the scissors. "Harold? But what are you doing here?" asks Richard. "You should have seen your face when the lights went out. I've never seen you so confused before." Harold keeps laughing, and Nicole angrily clenches her paws into fists. Her ears lower themselves, and the fur on her back rises. "Why on earth would you do that?" "Because some people get surprised so easily, and I think that's just hilarious." Good silly old pranks. "But you do realize the repairment costs a handful of money, right? You know how tight we are every month." Harold leans a bit over. "I guess the world is just a game of winners and losers, and you are the losers here." Nicole's anger turns into rage as she can't handle how ignorant the guy is. She sternly takes a step forward, but gets stopped by Richard and she hisses at him in response. "This guy literally just..." "I know, but no more rage from you," he says. "What? Why?" Richard sternly looks her in the eye. "That you were too scared to get triggered again. Now let's avoid this." Nicole frowns, as she knows he has a valid point. But she has several questions. Why did Harold target them specifically? She watches Richard stepping closer to Harold and speaking with him, but she suddenly feels too tired to keep track of the conversation. She frowns again and yawns before making her way back into the house. "What happened?" asks Anais. "Ugh, some guy just pulled a prank on us." What did he do?" asked Darwin. He cut the main wire of the house to trigger a reaction from your father or something. Gosh, thinking about this only makes me angrier." "Such a lame action, but who did this?" asked Anais. Nicole sighs deeply. "Harold, but your father insisted on dealing with him, so I let him." "Wait, you let him deal with Harold?" asked Gumball. Yeah. Why?" "I don't think that's a good idea, because he..." Gumball gets interrupted by Richard entering the house and quickly shutting the door behind him. Chapter 4. Anger. Richard leans with his back against the closed door and takes a deep breath. Nicole approaches him and puts her paws on his shoulders while looking him in the eye. Richard smiles, but Nicole clearly notices he forces his tears to stay inside. Her eyebrows rise, and she looks at him with a worried expression when he disappears into the bedroom after moving her paws away from him. "What's wrong with Mr. Dad?" asks Darwin. Nicole lowers her ears. I don't know, but I'll figure this out. It's time for you to go to bed." Gumball and Darwin don't dare to disobey her again and make their way upstairs, no matter how badly they wanted to stay up. Anais follows her brothers after giving her mother a kiss, and Nicole rubbed her ears. Nicole waits at the bottom of the stairs until she's sure that the kids got into bed. She then locks the front door and decides to change into her pajamas as well. When she enters the bedroom, she can hear her husband sobbing. She immediately runs to him and sits down on the bed while stroking his back. She is surprised, as she never has seen him before. He is hiding his face with his paws, and he feels more sensitive than ever. Nicole starts to worry that she might be the reason of his grief. And lets him lean over, resting his head on her chest. He calms a bit down when he can hear her heartbeat, and he opens his eyes. "Sweetie? What's wrong?" Richard looks away. I can't take it anymore. Take what anymore? Harold never insulted me so much before. He insulted you when you tried to teach him a lesson? Just ignore those lame comments, dear. You know, people like that don't mean it. That's the point. If it only were once. The couple stay silent for a moment, and Nicole looks at her husband with a confused expression. Richard then rises up and holds her paws while sitting in front of her. The bunny looks into the cat's eyes and sees her tilting her head, waiting for him to clarify. He sighs deeply and speaks. Nicole, there is something I need to tell you. And I know I should have told you earlier, but I just couldn't. You know you can tell me anything, dear. Richard nods and notices that his wife's tail rests on her lap, indicating she's well prepared to listen. Harold, well, he has never been a friend of mine, and bullied me since the prom at high school. Every time I encounter him, he attends several ways to make fun of me and my limited intelligence. He even thinks you made a big mistake by choosing me over any other possible partner. Nicole can't believe what she's hearing, and her eyes widen as anger starts to rise within her. Well, that's some of the hundreds of things he did to me so far. I just didn't want to break your heart by telling it. I'm so sorry, honey. Nicole tears up. Gosh, dear, I would have been heartbroken anyway. I didn't know he bothered you all along. I guess he always waits until you're not with me, due to him still being scared of the time you stared him down on that Saturday. Oh, I remember that. That's such a long time ago. It's pathetic how this man hasn't learned his lesson yet, and still acts this childishly. Richard nods in grief and looks down. Nicole frowns, and her eyes are no longer watery. No wonder why he's such a bad influence on her son Tobias. I like the kid, but I refuse him hanging out at hours for that reason. But I don't want you to go after him, Nicole. He's not Brandon. Dear, of course not. I'm just gonna have a serious conversation with him. How does he dare to treat you like this? Nicole shakes her head, and she lays down as Richard does the same. They hug, and Nicole caresses his fluffy cheek. I will avenge you. No one hurts my bunny, not on my watch. Nicole clenches her paws into fists again, and an angry expression appears on her face. Richard gets worried by this and bites his lip. Please. Richard gently grabs one of her paws and holds it in his. No claws. I will try. I mean, of course. Richard smiles briefly and nods. He then gets up for a moment to change into his pajamas and returns to bed. He hugs his wife and then turns around, falling asleep. Nicole sighs deeply when she realizes he fell asleep, but is still awake herself. She turns around and curls her tail around her hips. She holds her paws together and tries to fall asleep, but doesn't manage to. Her eyes are wide open while she's in deep thoughts and worries about her husband. Why hasn't he told me earlier, she thinks. Her hate towards the Wilson father starts growing as she remembers how he usually acts. She recalls the time he took her spot, on a parking lot, and she destroyed his car in anger. He deserved it, she thinks. But what if his teasing is also an act of revenge and all she did to him? No way. What he did to Richard is way worse and unacceptable. Nicole narrows her eyes. She then decides to have a serious talk with Harold tomorrow right away, after the kids would return from school. She would allow Tobias to hang out with her sons and to be able to visit his father without any suspicion. She doesn't want him to be prepared for the conversation and tries to remind herself to take in her medicine before going, because she is sure that that monster within would definitely get triggered. Nicole sighs again and closes her eyes. She calms down by hearing Richard's heartbeat when she moves closer to the bunny. She puts his head against his shoulder and eventually dwells off. Chapter 5, Ignorance. Thursday, 3 p.m. Gumball and Darwin are beyond excited when their mother finally approved of them hanging out with Tobias. She made the choice, as she doesn't know another way to approach Harold. She is also okay with the idea of Tobias having a sleepover at theirs Friday night, which surprised the boys a lot. They wonder if something is going on, but they eventually forget about it when they arrive at Tobias's house. Darwin is the first one to enter after Jackie invited them in. Jackie, Tobias's mother, is a young-spirited woman with great manners who tries her best to stay respectful towards others. Her husband Harold, however, isn't the same. Nicole notices he's pretending to be well-behaved, as no sarcastic jokes are involved when he greets the blue feline. The boys already disappeared upstairs with Tobias after giving their mother a hug. Now, the three parents are sitting at the dining table while Nicole tries not to get distracted by all the luxury around her. The Wilsons are rich and don't hesitate to show it. It's something that could sometimes get on Nicole's nerves, but she eventually snaps out of it as she anticipates another upcoming rivalry. The moment when Jackie eventually leaves the house to go to her sports club is the perfect chance for Nicole to request a conversation with Harold. Harold, may I talk to you about something in total seriousness? Harold raises an eyebrow, as he didn't expect the blue cat to suddenly get real. Sure can. What about? Nicole sighs deeply as she hopes not to lash out. A stabbing pain in her stomach reminds her of the fact she hasn't taken in her medicine yet and quickly grabs it from her purse. While downing her daily dose of the herb with water, Harold looks at her with a confused expression but patiently waits for her to speak. Sorry, I just remembered to take this in and... Anyway, as I was saying... Nicole leans a bit forward and holds her paws together as she feels determined to finally address what this man did to her husband. Apparently, Harold, you have been causing quite much damage towards my husband. Richard? He told you? Harold snickers, and this causes Nicole to frown. Listen, I just think it's about time to put a stop to this. Do you even realize how childishly you're behaving? Harold stops snickering again and again raises an eyebrow. You mean not letting Richard deal with troubles like this himself? You bullied him for years. How can't you notice it affected him? Makes sense he got affected. His self-esteem is just as low as his intellect anyway. Nicole widens her eyes and freezes. Excuse me? What did you just say? Oh, come on. Everyone knows he's short on common sense. He has his reasons. Haven't you ever wondered about his heartbreaking past? That still doesn't prove he isn't born with it. Nicole rises from her seat and her ears lower immediately. That is still not an excuse to mentally hurt him. How come you are so defensive all of a sudden? Don't you ever have any doubts about him? Nicole relaxes her shoulders and tilts her head a bit. Harold then crosses his arms and speaks up without thinking twice. Don't you ever think you deserve... Medicine or not, those words grow the raging fire within Nicole. She immediately returns into the pose she had earlier and bares her teeth. How dare you! Harold, who just got up from his seat, takes a step backwards as he suddenly regrets enraging the blue feline. No matter how badly Nicole hates her condition, right now she'd have found it useful. But as the medicine keeps everything calm underneath that blue fur coat, she can only decide to leave the Wilsons' house. With her paws clenched into fists, she storms off without even saying another word to Harold. She starts regretting the idea of Tobias coming over the next day, but eventually lets it slide, as she does not want to disappoint her sons. When Nicole arrives back home, she is filled with nothing but frustration. Harold had begged her to stay in control, but she feels too angry to let the Wilson father get away with anything. She reads 5 p.m. on the clock when she decides to distract herself for a while by starting to prepare tonight's dinner. After she lets some pasta boil, she checks the fridge in case any leftovers have been forgotten. Richard enters the kitchen when he smells the upcoming dinner and greets his wife by hugging her. "Hey honey, how was work today?" Nicole sighs. "It was fine, no worries. Busy as always, though." Richard nods and Nicole gives him a kiss. She closes the door of the fridge and gathers the final ingredients. "By the way, the boys have dinner at Tobias's tonight. Jackie will bring them back afterwards." "Oh well. Speaking of which, you visited Harold today?" asked Richard. "Yes, it was when I brought the boys there." "Oh, Richard dear, it's a mess." "What do you mean?" "He still goes on with that laid-back attitude and has no respect for you whatsoever. I'm so done." Nicole sternly cuts up an onion, and Richard's eyes tear up because of this. He looks over and sees it doesn't affect his wife at all. She continues chopping it up while her eyebrows lower themselves. He knows this means she's full of rage, but worry at the same time. Nicole sighs deeply when she stirs in one of the pans and sees in the corner of her vision that Richard made his way into the dining room again. She starts feeling more worried and eventually gets shocked when she encounters the storage of raw fish in the drawer of the fridge. "When did I buy all this?" she thinks. She quickly packs up the fish again and puts it back where it was. Her worry grows into anxiety when she starts thinking about the curse of her condition. Chapter 6. Sickening Night. Friday, 3 a.m. The night is cold and obnoxious when a breeze manages to make its way into the house. The Watterson kids are in deep slumber, and it is quieter than ever. The thin, cloudy sky causes the light from outside to become blue as it shines through the windows. The shadows are pitch black, and the blue light gives a sharp feel to the atmosphere. Richard is sleeping on his side while hugging his pillow and smiles as he experiences nice dreams about one of his favorite places, the bakery. His wife, on the other hand, isn't experiencing much of a dream at all. Her sleep is extremely light, and she restlessly keeps turning her head. She's laying on her back, and her limbs jerk one by one. Her racing heart indicates that her body is full of energy, negative energy, which she felt before. Nicole suddenly rises up while gasping and immediately grits her teeth. She can clearly hear her heart racing and her head hurts. Defeated by the fact she is now wide awake, the blue cat slowly gets out of bed and exits the room. She suddenly gets a déjà vu from when she called Mr. Yoshida after her night shift and it was all because she attacked Brandon, the worst nemesis she has ever had, besides herself. The memory of eventually having killed him makes her shake her head. She can't help but think about how much of a mess she was. But now, there's something else that worries her even more. Nicole enters the kitchen and manages to grab a glass from the counter in total darkness. She carefully opens the faucet, trying not to make too much noise, and fills the glass. She takes a deep breath after downing the water and hopes it'll calm her down. Her eyes keep looking around as if she fears something could attack her. She remains terrified of monsters and horror movies and how Richard forced her to try watching any science fiction related ones. Gosh, look at the monster I've become myself, she thinks, and her ears lower as she frowns in grief. In the meantime, something rather strange starts to happen. Nicole just put the glass back on the counter, and she suddenly freezes. She wanted to exit the kitchen quickly again, but her nose gets triggered by something which makes her pupils constrict. After slowly turning around, she opens the fridge and sees her attention got caught by the storage of fish again. Her normal senses manage to stay with her when she makes the decision to throw the fish away. She is usually utterly against throwing food away like this, but she tried to avoid what is about to happen. Nicole grabs the package with both of her paws and sternly walks to the back door. She puts it on a small garden table, which always gets carried back inside during colder times of the year, and she tries to find the keys of the door. The fact she cannot find them immediately causes her to suddenly forget it, and she loses control. Her mind becomes extremely blurry as she lets her paws touch the floor and walks towards the package on all fours. The fur on her back rises and causes her to shiver a bit, but strangely enough, she doesn't transform at all. Instead, it's just her usual self, but being in control by her greatest fear out of all, her primal instincts. When she manages to grab the package from the table with her teeth, she rips it open with her now unsheathed claws and stares at how the shiny scales inside of it reflect the light. The scene turns black as a feline no longer is aware of what she's doing. 7 a.m. The little light from the rising sun gives a warm vibe to the morning, but the upwelling mist immediately makes it uneasy. Nicole has no clue of what is happening to her when she awakens. When she just opened her eyes and tried to rise up a bit, her stomach cramps heavily and she immediately lays down again. The cold floor under her paws makes her realize she had been sleeping in the kitchen all night. She gasps and eventually manages to sit up straight with her legs folded underneath her. But when her eyes inspect everything around her, she stumbles upon the cause of her ache. Fish bones lay all over the floor. The juicy blood in the corner of her mouth and her paws indicate she ate all of the raw fish she originally was planning to throw out. She's beyond shocked and stares at her paws while shivering in fear. When she suddenly hears the alarm clock going off in the kids' room upstairs, she jumps up and quickly throws the fish bones in the bin. She cleans up the bit of blood on the floor and sprints upstairs as fast as she can in order to be able to use the bathroom first. She sighs in relief when she hears Gumball making his way downstairs after she closed the door. She takes a shower while hoping it will calm her down, but it's no use as she cannot stop thinking about the fish. She doesn't know what is going on and starts feeling rather scared than worried. Her back hurts badly as it is used to the comfortable mattress on her and Richard's bed. She shakes her head and tries to ignore the pain. After she is freshened up and prepared for work, she watches the kids leaving with the school bus, immediately reminding her of the fact Tobias is going to sleep over this evening. So, she grabs the sleeping bags from the basement and prepares a bit for, as the boys requested, their gaming night. After that, she walks into the kitchen and opens the cupboard above the stove to check if there's still enough of the medicine left. When she sees another package with leaves of the herb, she sighs in relief and her worried face a bit. It's gonna be fine. It's all gonna be fine, she thinks, and leaves for work before Richard is about to wake up. Oh god. Chapter 7. Aches and Bones. 3 p.m. Nicole always has hated having the turn to take care of the complaints office. No matter how busy her weekends still can be, Friday evenings used to be the only moment of rest during her week. But a shift at the complaints office always turns out being exhausting for her. Her overall shift started well today, but as soon as the lunch break was announced, It started going downhill. She hesitated eating when she held her sandwich in her paws. Last night made a strong but bad impact on her. Shock and surprise still ran through her, and when she eventually gave up, she packed her lunch again without having taken a single bite. The more she started worrying, the more her stomach started to ache. She eventually couldn't take it anymore when she finished calling one of the recent customers and waited until one of her colleagues would deal with the next ones. She suddenly freezes after hanging up the phone and bends a bit forward while her shoulders lower themselves. She grits her teeth and closes her eyes in pain as her cramps only get worse. She tries her best not to fall over when she reaches for her purse under her desk. She grabs her mobile phone and calls Richard while slowly getting extremely stressed. She holds her tail with her other paw to try staying calm and sighs when she hears Richard's voice at the other side of the line. "Hey honey, in case you called me for it, yes, I accidentally clicked your account while trying to log into mine, and that's why you probably got a notification. But no, I did not change anything as I got back into my own again." Nicole tries to chuckle by his goofing and sweetness, but can't due to her extreme pain. "No, dear, that's not what I'm calling for." "Then, what's up? Could you pick me up from work? I am not really doing well and can barely get actual work done." "Oh my, what happened? Is the muzzle still too tight?" Nicole totally forgot she is wearing a muzzle as she got used to it over time. It was one of the conditions she had to accept in order to get her job at the Rainbow Factory back, especially due to the fact her 2 murders weren't a secret to her boss anymore. But as it wasn't completely her fault, and she had to receive treatment for her monstrous curse, her punishment wasn't too bad. But Nicole doesn't feel any better at all. Despite being too shocked about her earlier actions, she had started believing she finally got a grip on her condition, but now she fears it's starting to act up again in a way that could be a worse danger to her family. One specific member in particular. Nicole shakes her head and fully awakens from her thoughts again. "No, I don't have any troubles with the muzzle. I just feel sick. My stomach hurts really bad. I think it's better to go home for that matter." "I understand. Could you give me some minutes? I'll be there as soon as possible," says Richard. "That's fine. Thank you, dear." Nicole hangs up and decides to leave the car in the underground parking lot until she'd find an opportunity to pick it up again. She feels too sick and insecure to drive home by herself right now. When she grabs her purse, she manages to catch Mr. Yoshida's attention. He walks up to her and anticipated what she is about to say as he noticed her clearly being hurt. "Dear sir, I don't feel well at all right now, and requested my husband to pick me up at some moments. I only hope for you to believe I will manage finishing the final spreadsheets as soon as I recovered a bit." Yoshida nods. "That's alright. I already asked Karen to take care of your part of the sheets that are due today, and I understand that you can't work under these circumstances." "Thank you, sir. Now, I hope you will feel better soon, Nicole." Nicole nods and respectfully greets Yoshida before taking the elevator to the ground floor, where she awaits Richard. In the meantime, Gumball and Darwin breakdance into the house as Tobias follows them while laughing. Anais was the last one of the 4 to get off the school bus and face-palms herself when she notices the boys being silly again. Gumball smiles widely when he sees all the stuff his mother set up earlier for their gaming night. "Sweet! Yo, I can't believe we finally can play the latest chapter in Zelmore," says Darwin, "which is impossible to complete with just 2 players, by the way." "Well, you're talking to a Zelmore pro who played all the games so far on my own," says Tobias. Gumball raises an eyebrow. "You're bluffing, aren't you?" Tobias sighs in relief. "Yeah, I'm buffering." "What does that matter? We can finally have a bro night!" Anais appears in front of the doorstep and lets the door shut with a loud slam to catch the boy's attention. Her arms and tilts her head a bit. "Yeah, Super fun to stuff yourself with treats and soda while gaming until you're square-eyed and keeping your little sister awake who tries to sleep at reasonable times, she says with a sarcastic tone. There's nothing you can do to ruin our night of fun, says Gumball. If Mom gets to know you keep me away on purpose just for the joy of annoying me, she'll kill all of you, says Anais. She kills anyway if she sees all the sour candy we bought today, says Gumball. Oh no, dude! You better not have those laying around, says Darwin. Yeah, you're right. Maybe they're a bit too sugary to eat all at once. Do we have any lighter snacks then? I'll check in the kitchen. Gumball nods and sits down on the air mattresses, which are accompanied by cozy sleeping bags. Tobias joins him, and they smile in excitement for the game. Oh, I love you, Mom, Gumball thinks when he sees the glasses set on the table, the poly station plugged in, and 3 consoles already being connected to the television. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Darwin found a bag of popcorn in the cupboard and jumps off the stool he moved over in order to reach it. He puts the stool back on its original place and looks at the label on the back for a moment. He then suddenly turns his head when he smells something. Something he doesn't like. Something that rather unsettles him. He hops towards the bin in the backyard, which is right next to the door, and lifts the cover when he followed the scent. His eyes widen in shock from what he sees. Gumball starts getting impatient and wonders why Darwin is taking so long. He gets up from the air mattresses after he raised his eyebrow at Tobias, who is wondering the same. He walks into the kitchen and stumbles upon Darwin, who still is staring at the insides of the bin. Gumball puts his paw on the shoulder of his scaly brother, who didn't notice him coming. Dude, are you alright? You look like as if you've seen a ghost. Why are there so many? Darwin doesn't finish his sentence and gets Gumball confused in the process, but as soon as Gumball sees what's in the bin, he turns just as shocked as his brother. Fish bones. Lots of fish bones. Gumball covers his mouth with one of his paws. Oh my gosh! I thought us Watersons had promised one thing from the start. What? Well, shouldn't we, not be eating fish at all? Huh? No, dude! You know very well the fish from the supermarket isn't the same as a developed being like me. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Darwin crosses his fins in disapproval, and Gumball scratches the back of his head. But what is shocking about this? Look closely. I don't really feel like touching something organic that has been in the trash, especially not a half-digested fish skeleton. That's the point. Look at how these bones are so shriveled up. That indicates these fish have been eaten fairly fast. Gumball picks up a stick from the ground and pokes in a bin, which only reveals even more fish remains. Oh jeez, I didn't even notice how much there is. Anais and Tobias showed themselves in the post at the back door. Tobias stays standing a bit awkwardly in silence while Anais steps forward to her brothers. Playing Sherlock again? She says. The boys did not expect her to suddenly join them, and Gumball drops his stick. No, we just discovered this. Darwin points with his fin at the bin. Gumball and him step aside as their sister gets closer to it as well. Oh my, that's a lot of fish, she says. Or that was a lot of fish. Exactly. Do you think maybe Mom has something to do with this? Anais and Darwin gasp. But I thought Mrs. Mom had better medication now. Well, no matter how reliable the hub is, anything is still possible, says Anais. What do you mean? Didn't you notice how bleak she was this morning? She barely said a word when we were having breakfast. But I don't want to live in fear of our mother's transformations any longer, says Darwin. Guys, stop, says Anais as she tries to whisper. And shush! Do you want Tobias to know her secret as well? Gumball tries to keep the volume of his voice low. Huh? I thought everyone in Elmer was already aware of it. Not everyone. Only the people with authority, as far as I can remember. Anyway, No matter how dangerous the condition is, we need to keep our mother protected. Anais and the boys did not notice Nicole entering the garden and appearing behind them. In doing so, she managed to follow the last part of what her daughter said. "Protected from what?" she says sternly. Chapter 8. Conceal. The three kids gasp and quickly turn around to face their mother, who has her arms crossed and tries her best to frown, despite how sick she still feels. Hey, I expect you to be home earlier. Well, everything has a reason. Just like I asked why the door was left open all the time, you know very well that we need to prevent too much coldness from entering the house during winters. Gumball straightens his back. But isn't it like November? Nicole's dropped ears only lower more as she bares one of her fangs. Fine. Colder periods of autumn as well, so get back inside. What were you doing anyway? Darwin glances at the fish bones behind him, but in doing so, reveals what is up. Nicole's frown immediately turns into a shocked expression when she sees her traces of last night's disaster. She starts shivering and shakes her head. Get inside. Now. What? Don't you, Nicole pinches the bridge of her nose. I said get inside! Gumball shuts his mouth and obeys his mother as he rushes back into the house. Anais and Darwin move too and follow their brother in silence. Nicole waits for them to have gone inside and immediately changes the trash bag of the bin. She walks around the house to the front yard and puts the bag in the container, hoping no one will find it again. She stands still in front of the door and holds her head for a second before making her way into the house as well. 6:30 p.m. Nicole insisted on preparing dinner, despite still feeling very unwell. Richard was sweet to offer ordering a pizza, but Nicole wanted to prevent losing too much money, as they're currently tight again. She's too worried that they'll risk becoming broke and shakes her head after she puts some chicken in the oven. She sternly continues preparing the rest of the food and isn't even aware of the two curious eyes peeking at her from the entrance of the kitchen. Darwin, being worried, looks at his adoptive mother while hiding around the corner. He inspects her from nose to tail and notices clear signals of her not being alright. Her fur is still a bit bleak, and her tail hangs completely still without slightly swinging like it usually does. Darwin needs to force himself not to gasp when he notices that bits of her spine can be seen through her shirt. She started refusing to eat after last night, and her body, which is used to her structured lifestyle, doesn't handle it well. The bad aches, caused by the fish and extreme guilt, turned into a stabbing pain caused by what she's trying to fight right now. After some time, when dinner was served, Darwin can't stop looking into the direction of where Nicole was sitting. He doesn't want her to catch him staring at her, and tries to keep up with Gumball's conversation. In between the chatter of the two bunnies, Rainbow Lad and Blue Kitten, Darwin sees his adoptive mother bend over her dish in silence. The corners of her mouth are low on her face, and she sighs as she doesn't manage taking a bite due to her pain. The little goldfish starts sweating nervously and wants to say something, but strongly hesitates. He shivers a bit, but eventually forces himself to address the elephant in the room. Mrs. Mom? Are you okay? The Wattersons and Tobias all suddenly turn quiet and look into the direction of Nicole, who awkwardly grins, her eyebrows rise in concern. Oh, I'm fine. Well, still feeling a bit too sick to eat, I guess. Richard gets affected by those words and isn't familiar with anyone not having an appetite. He gets up and moves his chair next to Nicole in order to hold her paw. Aw, honey, I understand it hurts, but you know taking care of your body's needs will make you feel better, right? Nicole stays silent for a moment and stares at her paws, which she rests on her lap. Her ears twitch, and she can see Richard awaiting a response in the corner of her eye. She feels Even more odd when she realizes she's forgetting something but doesn't immediately know what, as her mind is restless and full of thoughts. She then lifts her head and gives a slight smile before reaching for her fork again. You're right, honey. I will try. No matter how much Nicole struggles with it, she knows her husband made a valid point. She takes a bite from the chicken on her plate, which fortunately didn't cool off yet, and bravely swallows it while hoping her body will take it. Richard is glad to see her trying, and only hopes his wife will feel better as soon as possible. But his curiosity is strong as well. He wonders how all of a sudden she got sick again, just like the time she got in contact with the sabotaged CUB core. That device was part of Brendan's vengeful plans and even stimulated Nicole's first actual murder, the one that triggered the worst in her. Richard frowns and hopes she doesn't have any mental scars left from the corrupted device. Honey, I am just curious, but do you know what caused your sickness right now? Nicole freezes, and her ears immediately drop when she remembers the incident with the fish from last night. She slightly turns her head and sees her own kids staring at her as if they exactly knew what she did. One look she gives her scaly adoptive son is enough to remind her of the fact coming clean about her vicious feasting would terrify him. No matter how well she knows her family can help her with getting control over her condition, she does not want them to know. She does not want to give the image of a ferocious beast even more, especially now in front of an unaware guest, Tobias in this case, who tries his best to hide his confusion, as he doesn't want to come in between an adult's conversation. Nicole gulps, as she has been silent for 2 minutes now and let Richard wait for a response again. She sighs and decides to settle for the easiest excuse that comes to mind. I think it's just stress. Stress? Yes. I am not used to working with closed deadlines like before, and probably am still struggling with getting back on track. Oh, right. I understand that. Nicole hopes he took it, as she cannot see whether he believes her or not. She carefully goes for a third bite. The food Nicole eventually had managed later that evening wasn't much, but at least something after skipping too many meals. Fear still runs through her body when she put all the plates in a dishwasher and returns to the table. She sits back down as she wants to accompany the 4 kids enjoying some ice cream for dessert. Richard has already found the couch and figured he'd stay there the rest of the evening. Nicole casually grabs her laptop from the kitchen counter and opens it while still sitting at the dining table with the kids. She tilts her head a bit to see her lovable kids talking about their general topics with Tobias, and she smiles. She still gets a warm feeling inside when she sees her kids being able to share their thoughts and interests with a friend and doesn't regret Tobias coming over after all. She frowns as she remembers his father, who truly the culprit behind the bad attitude is. Tobias behaves himself once he enters the Watterson's house, as he knows about the powerful alpha of the family who needs to be respected. He knows what great power the blue feline possesses and never dares to get in trouble with her for that cause. If only he knew about the risk his father had been taking so far. The 4 kids suddenly gasp and freeze when they hear the blue cat in front of them growling and powerfully closing the laptop in rage. Nicole had just checked their financial balance and noticed something that snapped her patience in half. A negative number showed up, indicating a big expenditure had been made. The Watterson kids look at each other worriedly, as they fear the worst, while Tobias is still confused. Nicole tried her best not to sound too snappy, but her anger got most of her, as her request to Richard for him to come turned into a demand. Richard gets a bit shocked by her tone and immediately obeys her, as he appears at the dining table. What is it, honey? Nicole pinches the bridge of her nose. Why, Richard? Why is there a loss of $100? What did you spend all that money on? Richard gulps and knows exactly what his wife is talking about, but doesn't dare to speak up. Chapter 9: The Beast's Reveal. Richard regrets every single bit of his action, as he is responsible for the loss of $100 and stares at the floor in silence. He knows his wife is staring extremely stern at him, as he feels as if she's burning the fur on his face with her eyes. He knows how strict she is when it comes to money, and prays to himself that she'll be forgiving. Well? I'm so sorry. I had to pay someone back. What? Who did you lend money from? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't lend anything. Then I demand an explanation. You know we, and specifically me, need that money for medication besides all other general costs. Richard goes silent for a brief moment and nervously holds his paws together. Richard, I demand an explanation. Now! Richard's long floppy ears drop, and he feels his heart racing when he looks into the narrowed eyes of his angry wife. The longer he stays silent, the more furious she gets. But Richard has no choice but speaking up when he notices the blue feline tightly holding the table with her paws, and forcing her claws to stay sheathed. The tension builds up within her and starts awakening what she fears most, but as her anger took control of her mind, there is no room for being afraid. It was a fine from Harold. He threatened me that he'd make us lose the house if I didn't pay. He claimed that the fine was for wasting his precious time when you came to talk with him. Nicole can't believe it. She doesn't want to be mad at Richard, but gets agitated by the way he didn't stand his ground. She suddenly starts getting extremely stressed when she thinks about the fact they now don't have enough money for her medication. The spare savings already got spent on repairment of the electrical wire of the house, which Harold cut. No way. He cut it, Nicole thinks. He cut it! This man is trying to ruin us! Richard tears up. Us? He wants to bring me down, Nicole! Richard immediately regrets his tone, especially because she visibly is about to have an outburst. He covers his mouth with his paws and stares at the kids in the living room with a terrified expression. The kids got shocked and all fall back away, until they stand next to the staircase. Nicole has her eyes closed and freezes after having jumped up from her chair, as if her brain didn't process yet what her husband just said. She opens her eyes and her eyebrows lower themselves. That is extremely egoistic to think, Richard! Richard gulps, and his eyes quickly inspect the dining room, hoping he'd find a package of his wife's medicine. I know he bullies you, but how are we supposed to survive as a family of 5 in this way? Nicole's shouting echoes in the rooms at the lower floor of the house. When she lowers her head, her back suddenly cracks and makes her fall over, indicating the beast of the curse got woken up again. Tobias tries not to make a sound when he almost gasps out of shock from all that is happening in front of him. He stays hidden behind the staircase's baluster with the Watterson kids. He sees how the pink bunny desperately tries hugging his wife to apologize and calm her down, but the feisty blue cat violently pushes him away from her and gives in to her pain, as her body starts trembling heavily. The scene is even too shocking for the rainbow lad, who is used to graphic video game imagery and looks away when he hears the terrific grunting and screaming. He then suddenly gets pulled up the stairs by Anais, who grabbed his sweatband. The 4 kids gather on top of the stairs, next to the bathroom door. They crouch in fear and face each other while trying to ignore the violence downstairs. Gee, what in the name of the Zelmer gobbling is happening to your mother? Asked Tobias. Anais sighs. We had hoped you didn't have to witness or know about it. Mrs. Mom suffers from a supernatural condition in which her anger plays a big role. So, when she gets extremely upset, she transforms, yes. Believe us. We know it's terrifying. Does this happen a lot? After it got triggered for the first time, yes, but she eventually got a grip on it. We got a little bit used to it though, but I think she just forgot to take in her medicine tonight. Medicine? Yeah, there's some sort of plant that can calm her down. But what if you guys can't afford it anymore? Oh, Mom could theoretically kill us. Darwin looks down at his fins, and his pupils turn big as he starts remembering recent signs. Or eat us. There's a silence. The three kids stare at their adoptive brother and friend in surprise. Richard, in the meantime, managed to escape to the kitchen and found the last package of the medicine. Him not having a choice, pins his vicious wife down with all his might and tries to grab her snout while avoiding the huge sharp teeth. She furiously tries to get him off her and tears several parts of his blouse with her claws. Richard doesn't want to give up and grits his teeth when he manages to grab hers. He keeps her head still by holding each saber-tooth-sized fang with his paws. His eyes meet his wife's glowing yellow ones that barely manage to stay open due to her exhaustion. The dog bags under her eyes make her look like a dragon that hasn't been able to release its fire for centuries. Richard quickly grabs the herb with one of his paws and puts it in between the feline's open jaws. She gags after she swallowed it, and Richard lets her go. She holds her head tightly and mutters until she turns back to her normal self again. Richard sighs in relief, and Nicole immediately hugs him after regaining her normal senses. Her burying her head in his shoulders causes her sobbing to be almost quiet, but Richard feels her shoulders shaking, which indicates she indeed is crying. The couple have both forgiven each other in silence and keep hugging for a long while. In the meantime, the three kids are confused by what Darwin just said. Anaïs's floppy ears drop. Why would you think that, Darwin? Yeah, dude, Mom isn't feral like that. Darwin is also confused by his own thoughts, but reminds himself that he only was speaking his mind. Don't you remember? The eaten pet fishes? The bones in the bin? Nah, we've been over that. You said yourself that a developed being like you isn't the same as supermarket fish, says Gumball. I think the last thing a mother would do is eating her own son, says Tobias. You're right. What am I thinking? Mrs. Mom would never do such a thing. Chapter 10. Warning. The Watterson kids and Tobias had eventually tried to ignore everything that happened. Nicole's medicine worked perfectly, as she was extremely calm for the rest of the evening. The boys also originally planned to stay up the whole night, which would annoy Anaïs, but changed their minds as they didn't want to let the blue feline get enraged again. They still agreed to the fact they did have fun together, but Tobias feels his fear rising within himself again when he leaves the next day. At 9 p.m. Wait, what? Come again? Says Harold. He gets surprised by what his son just told him and tilts his head after he freezes on the stairs as he was making his way up. Tobias keeps standing at the bottom of the staircase and looks at his father with wide eyes. You gotta believe me, Dad. It's true. Gumball's mother suffers from a condition where she transforms into a monster? Tobias nods heavily, but stops when he sees his father raising an eyebrow. That's ridiculous. I've never heard such baloney from you before. I've seen it with my own eyes. Now don't tell me her teeth enlarged or something. That is exactly what happened. You should have seen her eyes glow as well. Terrifying. Harold crosses his arms for a second and silently stares at his son before bursting into laughter. Oh, son. I knew that sleepover would bring more consequences than just sleep deprivation. You've been playing too many sci-fi video games. What? No! You have to believe me! Son, please stop. Go tell your jokes and haunting stories to Rachel instead of bothering me. You don't get it! You should also quit bullying Mr. Watterson for that matter. Harold walks up the stairs and turns around to face his son while shaking his head and sighing. You have no idea what risk you are taking right now, Dad. Nicole wouldn't dare hurting me. My word is stronger than hers in court because of her destructive behavior at times. This is different, Dad. Even the time she gave you a death glare when you joined that party at their house, or when she destroyed your car with her bare paws, weren't so bad at all compared to what she's capable of now. Those times weren't that bad anyways. The Wattersons were being stacked with bills after those events, though. The Wattersons, such an outlandish family. Well, they at least don't hurt anyone on purpose, or make their life almost unbearable. What happens in between Richard and me is none of your business, son. And what does it have to do with Nicole's raging behavior anyway? Because that nasty fine you gave them was an intense trigger from Mrs. Watterson's episode. They are broke now. Well, you know well how tight they usually are. Harold sighs and puts his hand on his forehead. Look, son, I don't have time for this. Nicole got what she deserved anyway, as that car of mine was a unique model. Harold turns around and walks into another room, not even waiting to see if Tobias still had something to say. Tobias steps forward and yells up the stairs, even though his father completely ignores him. You're gonna regret this! I am not stitching your scars where you got caught by her. You hear me? Meanwhile, at the Wattersons' house, Darwin had already put on his dinosaur feet slippers and went upstairs with Gumball, who changed into his pajamas. Richard is already asleep as the boys enter their room as quietly as possible. Nicole, who just got up the stairs as well, notices their door closing in the corner of her sight. She raises an eyebrow and carefully enters without wanting to wake up Anais as well. Gumball is sitting on his bed, with Anais above him in the upper bunk, and Darwin freezes when he notices his adoptive mother entering as he wanted to climb into his fishbowl. You boys are already going to sleep? Nicole whispers. Yes, says Darwin. But it's Saturday. Don't you want any ice cream? Gumball wanted to reply with a happy yes, but Darwin quickly covers his mouth and only muffling can be heard from the little blue kitten. No thank you, Miss Mom. We're both really tired from the sleepover. Maybe another time? Nicole's eyebrows rise as she's worried that Darwin is hiding something he is upset about, but as she completely accepts the boy's choice, she decides to leave them be. Alright then, sweet dreams. Gumball gets a bit grumpy by his adopted brother's interruption and lays down on his back. Darwin managed to get into his bowl and tries not to shiver in fear when he receives a kiss on his head from his adoptive mother. Nicole leaves the room and shuts the door behind her after kissing Gumball goodnight as well. Gumball turns his head and stares into the eyes of the little goldfish, who peeks at him from underwater. Dude, what was that all about? I'm so sorry, bro. I know you really wanted the ice cream, but I can't handle staying awake for longer now. What? Why? I don't know. I'm just a bit scared. Scared of what? Darwin stays silent and looks down at the floor. Gumball puts his paws above the covers and lays on his side. Is it Mom? Darwin silently nods while still avoiding eye contact with Gumball. The little blue kitten frowns in confusion. But remember, we have been over this. Like, again, Mom isn't gonna hurt you. She doesn't even show violent tendencies towards you. I know, but I'm so worried. We don't have enough money for her meds now, and she started looking so starved. Starved? You mean that because she struggled with eating throughout the day? You know she got home earlier because she's a bit sick, right? Yes, but sick of what? Didn't you see how well parts of her bones were visible? Normally, she's nothing but muscle. I'm afraid it looks worse in your eyes than it actually is, though. She's been so sweet the rest of the evening, just like usual, you know? But what if she's hiding it? Just pretending. Hiding what? Darwin closes his eyes while he tees up and doesn't dare to speak up for a second. Gumball gets a bit worried and moves closer. Hiding what, Darwin? Predatory instincts. Chapter 11. Affliction. 12 a.m. Heavy rain outside indicates the coldest period of the year is approaching, as temperatures started lowering till below the freezing point. The Watersons, besides the fact money is a complicated topic at the moment, fortunately still have enough gas and electricity, and don't have to fear a grueling winter. Neither Nicole nor Richard manage falling asleep. Richard is being kept awake by his wife, who hasn't stopped turning and keeps grunting out of pain. Her stomach didn't stop aching, and it messes with her energy. She knows very well that something strange is going on, but fears the worst. She eventually stops turning and chooses one side to sleep on, with her back faced to Richard. Richard moves closer to her when he hears her whining and sees how she curls herself up while tightly holding onto her stomach. He gently wraps his arms around her shoulders and rubs his hands against hers. Honey? Does it still hurt? Nicole opens her eyes as she closed them earlier in agony and groans. Yes, I even fear it's getting worse. Oh dear. If this keeps up any longer, don't you think we need to ask a doctor for help? We don't have the money for it, Richard. Richard sighs in grief. Oh yeah, I'm so sorry, honey. I've been such a fool, and now I'm the one responsible for your suffering. No, it isn't. Don't say something foolish like that. It wasn't your fault. It's Harold who should have left you alone since the very beginning. Richard stays silent for a moment, and Nicole eventually turns back around to look him in the eye. She still has the same dog bags under her eyes like before, but her fur turned back to its normal tone again. Her pupils then suddenly constrict when she feels another cramp and curls up in the same position she had before. Richard watches her in deep concern and carefully puts his paws on hers, hoping it could comfort her. What is happening to me, Richard? Do you have any idea? I feel like the upper limit is developing itself further inside me. Well, what makes you say that? Remember the time you were scared of me? While you discussed the topic that was sensitive to me? Which? Nicole whispers with a raspy voice. A predator. Richard shakes his head in surprise of his wife actually saying that word herself. He then nods and his floppy ears drop. Well, you had the right to be afraid. I'm so disgusted by the beast I turned into. But last night went well, remember? You know you can't do anything about your transformations besides remembering your medication. It's not that. The sickness I feel. It has developed from an event that could become a danger to one of our kids. I'm sorry, but I don't get it. I guess I'll have to admit it now. I apparently can't handle dealing with fish as a meal anymore properly, as I literally, unconsciously, ate it all once. The weirdest thing about this is that I didn't even have a case of the limit. It just happened. Without me being aware until I woke up in the kitchen with a heavy stomach ache. Gosh, I understand that messes with your body, but Why would that bring our kids into danger? Darwin, honey! My sweet little... Richard wonders why she interrupted her own words, but when she raises her head, he gasps in shock. Some drool flows down the corner of her mouth as she stares blankly into the eyes of her husband. His worried frowning is enough for her to suddenly become fully aware of her surroundings again as she shakes her head. But when she rubs her whiskers, she suddenly feels her own slimy drool on her paw and gasps as well. She quickly wipes it away and covers her eyes with both paws. Oh my gosh, see what I mean? This is no good at all. The thought is already making me sicker. So you're worried that I can't think or talk about him without drooling, Richard? That is not what should be happening to a mother. Isn't it just because you've been struggling with eating the last days? You said you felt too sick. I was, and still am. But unfortunately, and strangely enough, it hasn't ruined my appetite. So despite how much pain you feel, you're still hungry? Starving, Richard. But I can't do anything about it. Richard doesn't know how to respond and backs away from her in fear. She notices this and lowers her head in embarrassment. I don't want to hurt anyone, okay? Especially not my son. I love him too much. And I even fear he might have suspicions already. Nicole can't take it anymore, and tears starts flowing down her cheeks. She regrets telling everything, as she knows for sure that her husband is scared as well now. She turns around and pulls the covers over her shoulder without saying another word. She frowns and tries her best to ignore the pain. Her Richard turns around too, but feels extremely guilty for not comforting her due to him feeling too afraid. Even though he isn't the one in immediate danger, thoughts and memories about before run through his mind. Her telling about the fact she didn't transform while losing her normal senses makes his heart pounding. But the way she just had stared into his eyes made an alarm go off in his head. Can't think or talk about him without drooling. It echoes in Nicole's mind as she keeps frowning with her eyes closed, but little does she know about the fact that she's not the only one who experiences a troubled sleep. Air bubbles and Darwin's fishbowl multiply themselves faster as the little goldfish keeps moving around restlessly. Even though he's underwater, he sweats a lot, and his mind lets him awaken in a dream. Chapter 12. Dark, Dark Forest. It appears to be a cold night, but Darwin, strangely enough, doesn't feel any difference in temperature at all when he opens his eyes. He gets up and sees he had been camping in the forest with his siblings, but he cannot find any trace of them besides their neglected camping attributes. As the surroundings are heavily vegetated and almost pitch black, the goldfish grabs some matches from his sister's rucksack that he encountered behind their tent. Out of wanting to look for his siblings and without really having a choice, he enters the dark shadows of the trees with a lightened up match. Its light isn't much, but still enough for him to see while he is walking. But after a long time of wandering without having found anything, he gives up. To his horror, he realizes he actually got lost now, and his matches are running out. He fears he won't make it through the night as he knows the forest is full of predatory animals. Darwin lights up his last match and sits down on a mossy log with low shoulders in defeat. Suddenly, a breeze turns into a strong wind and makes its way through the trees, creating a freaky howling sound. His match gets blown out, and his hope is lost when he has no choice but embracing the darkness. The howling sound returns, and his eyes widen out of fear as it reminds him of wolves. Then suddenly, he hears a stick snapping and soft footsteps coming closer to him. He panics by the fact he doesn't know from which direction it's approaching, and freezes when he hears heavy breathing right behind him. He jumps from the log and turns around, only to see two glowing yellow eyes towering above him. He gasps and feels like screaming, but hesitates when the figure speaks up. Scared of wolves? Yeah. Well, wolves aren't the animals you need to fear here. Darwin sighs in relief. Glad they don't live here. But then he realizes that he actually recognizes the voice. But, wait, Mrs. Mom? Is that you? The figure steps closer, and Darwin can see its quite tall silhouette. The yellow eyes didn't make him recognize her, but the fact bits of her blue fur can be seen in the light of the rising full moon gives away it indeed is her. Nicole's eyes narrow, and this causes Darwin not even being able to be happy that he found a family member. The blue feline's yellow eyes then turn into a darker tone as her constricted pupils start glowing. Mrs. Mom? I am not your mother. What? I thought you hated it when people would even call me adopted. Nicole furiously growls, and Darwin shuts his mouth in response. He then expects her from nose to tail, as the moon now reveals more of her appearance. Lots of her ribcage is now visible through her shirt as well, and her unsheathed claws are so brightly white that they can be seen shining in the total darkness. The long, curvy, and extremely sharp claws flicker in the moonlight when the blue cat subtly flexes her fingers. Darwin then looks at her face again, but he gasps when he suddenly sees saliva dripping from her lips. Her ears have now lowered themselves, and she takes a powerful step forward. A ferocious beast shouldn't be your mother. A ferocious beast doesn't protect you. A ferocious beast belongs here in the forest with all other predators. Then what are you saying? That you were foolish enough to enter my territory. What? Mrs. Mom, you belong at home, with us, and Mr. Dad. Darwin's heartbeat increases speed, and he tears up in fright when he suddenly hears Nicole's voice terrifically lower itself. I said I was not your mother! Then who are you? Your demise! Darwin screams it out when he gets pinned down by the blue feline who has gone fully feral. He desperately tries to release himself from the two clawed paws that hold his fins on the ground. A terrifying grin appears on the blue monster's face, which has taken the place of his adoptive mother. He keeps screaming while tears roll down his cheeks until he doesn't see anything but large, sharp teeth racing towards him. Darwin screams when he wakes up, rises above the surface of the water in his fishbowl, and starts sobbing uncontrollably. Anais, being the only other one in the room as Gumball went to the bathroom, immediately wakes up by her adoptive brother screaming. Oh, Daisy Flakes! What's wrong, Darwin? Darwin doesn't even manage speaking up as he bawls his eyes out. Anais watches him in deep concern and quickly climbs down the bunk bed to approach him. She carefully pats him on the head and looks into his frightened eyes through his fishbowl's glass. Did you have a bad dream? Darwin nods in silence. Gumball has several questions when he returns into the room after he just heard his brother scream. Yo, what happened? He had a nightmare. A very bad one, I fear, says Anais. Gumball stands next to his sister and looks at his cowering adoptive brother. He then also puts his paw on his head, and his ears drop in worry. Do you want to talk about it, buddy? Darwin shivers when he raises his head and looks his brother in the eye. I don't know. Darwin tries to forget it and quickly turns around, closing his eyes again. Gumball and Anais don't really know what to do, as they want to leave their scaly brother in peace, but also are extremely worried about him. They then return to their beds as well, after giving each other a grieving look. Gumball is laying on his back and stares at the upper bunk, for where Anais peeks at him while letting her head hang over the border. Sis? Do you know where Darwin's fear came from? I tried reassuring him, but I'm afraid he doesn't believe me. Gumball, you've seen the situations Mom goes through. I bet this is a bit more overwhelming for him. Overwhelming? He might even see Mom as a dangerous killer. Well, is she? What? Bro, she killed 2 people. Yeah, but that wasn't her fault. It's all been so messed up for her. I know. But I understand Darwin's fear. Maybe we need to tell Mom about this so that she can show him that he doesn't need to be afraid. Yeah, we should. It'll all be fine, Gumball, okay? I know, sis. Thank you, says Gumball as he smiles. Well, good night. Good night. Both Gumball and Anais turn around and fall asleep. Chapter 13. Unease. Sunday, 7 p.m. The Watterson father and kids just finished dinner after a long day of budget grocery shopping. Nicole still felt too tired and did not join the grocery session, as she took a nap and did housework for most of the time. She hasn't said a single word and didn't even manage to properly greet her family when she entered the dining room. And she has only given them a brief smile. A smile which was extremely forced on her face and was supposed to hide the pain, but the kids already know she isn't feeling better. Nicole joins her kids at the table after Richard settled on the couch, and she grabs a newspaper to prevent them from possibly asking on any questions. She then puts one of her paws below her chest and sighs. Her stomach fortunately doesn't ache that much anymore, but she feels that her hunger is slowly getting the best of her, and it scares her a lot. Still, nothing can be managed by her body, except the one thing that she fears the upper limit is making her crave for. She lowers the newspaper in her paws a bit and peeks above it, but when she realizes she can't stop looking at her adoptive son's vulnerable fins, she sternly looks away and as she feels some drool exiting her mouth again. Defeated by disgust and anger at herself, she suddenly gets up and tries to get distracted by sorting out the fridge. Gumball and Anais nod at each other after they saw their mother heading to the kitchen. They both then turn to Darwin and explain their plan. Look, bro, you probably ain't gonna like this idea, but we know there's another way to fix this. What is it? We think a talk with Mom could do good. A talk? With her? Yes, I mean, how else are you two supposed to gain each other's trust again? Oh, fair point. But something doesn't feel right. Do I need to do this on my own? Of course not. You'll be talking with her. No, I mean, wouldn't any of you guys join me? You're too scared to talk with her on your own? What do you take her for, dude? Anais quickly punches Gumball's shoulders, making him silent. After giving him a disapproving glare, she turns back to Darwin and sighs. I understand you're scared, but you need to learn to trust Mom again. She'll trust you if you show that you trust her. Yeah, and again, she won't hurt you. Darwin nervously holds his fins together and nods. Gumball and Anais smile and join their father on the couch. Darwin turns his head to see his sister reading and his brother playing a video game. He then gets off his chair and slowly walks into the direction of the kitchen, where Nicole can be seen standing in front of the window with her eyes closed. She tries to focus on her breathing while she holds the carton she got from the fridge. She's extremely scared by the fact they are out of medicine for her condition. She carefully puts the carton next to the sink and lowers her head. Darwin steps inside the kitchen and sees it's a rainy evening. He stays standing next to the fridge and holds his fins behind him. Mrs. Mom? Nicole did not expect her adoptive son to suddenly be right behind her and quickly turns around while her eyes widen in surprise. She then shakes her head and tries to look as normal as possible. Oh, hey there, sweetie. What's up? Darwin inspects her paws and sighs in relief when he sees that her claws are still sheathed. There is just something I would like to talk about. Nicole nods in full seriousness and takes him outside in the backyard so that they have more privacy. She sits down on the small staircase at the back door, and Darwin joins her while keeping a bit of distance. Nicole's ears are low and she stares at the floor while her tail waves slowly. Darwin also avoids eye contact and keeps staring at his shoes. I had a nightmare last night. Really? What about? Oh, well, it started with me being alone in a forest, and it was dark. Nicole nods. Did the forest scare you? No, you were there to tell me that there weren't any wolves. Some of the animals that scare me the most. And what happened then? Darwin gulps and starts shivering in fear as he recalls scenes from his nightmare. Should he really tell her? He can't imagine simply screaming, "And then you ate me," in her face. He doesn't know anymore and regrets this conversation. It just... You... everything suddenly went black and turned into a void. Oh? Nicole stays silent as she feels like Darwin didn't fully tell the truth, but as he wanted to share that worry himself, she lets it slide. Well, just understand that... I understand that frightens you, but just remember you are safe with us. You know you can always talk about your fears with me, okay? Yes, I know. Thank you, Mrs. Mom. Nicole and Darwin briefly smile at each other, and the little goldfish dares to come closer. Does anything frighten you as well? Darwin has no idea why he asked that question, but there's no going back now. Nicole's smile immediately disappears. What frightens me? I can't tell you this. Why not? I'm worried about you, Mrs. Mom. Oh, I'm just not feeling alright still, you know? Darwin nods and moves even closer to the blue feline, whose pupils suddenly constrict. I hope you feel better soon. Aw, you're too sweet, honey. Darwin carefully puts a fin on her shoulder, as he feels less scared now. The two turn their heads and look each other in the eye. Nicole can see her adoptive son's big pupils worriedly moving as he keeps smiling. Nicole wants to smile another time, but suddenly feels a shock going through her body. She shivers for a brief moment, and her ears twitch. She then turns away from Darwin, as she fears that the beast within gave her a wake-up call. Darwin is confused and wants to approach her again, but she stops him while holding her head with one paw. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. But I can't handle this right now. Handle what? My sickness. It's getting too much. Darwin takes a step forward, but Nicole once again stops him from getting closer as she now uses her other paw to hide her mouth, which extremely salivates. No, please, I beg you. Stay away. Please tell me if I can help. Nicole jumps up and sprints back into the house, disappearing into her and Richard's bedroom. Darwin watches her and slowly makes his way inside as well. He walks into the living room and stops at the bedroom door. He can't hear anything when he puts his head against it, but knows that his adoptive mother is there. She's sitting on the bed while tightly holding her pillow, and her claws accidentally rip some parts of it as they unsheath. She hides her face in it and shivers again, but she raises her head when she hears the high voice of her scaly son. Mrs. Mom? I'm so sorry if I made you upset. You didn't, sweetie. Don't worry. Then what is wrong? If you don't want to tell me, you could tell Mr. Dad. I just still feel a bit sick right now. I will get better. Oh, okay then. Just know I'm here to help. Nicole then murmurs, I don't think you'll be able to help, except in one way. Darwin did not understand what the blue feline just said, but she definitely is glad about that. She quickly covers her mouth and angrily pulls her ears with both paws. Ugh, what the heck, Nicole? She thinks. What did you say? Nothing, sweetie. I just want to thank you. Now, would you mind leaving me be for a while? Of course. Talk to you later. Nicole sighs deeply when she hears her adoptive son getting away from the door as she lays down on her back. She then closes her eyes out of exhaustion. Chapter 14. Forage. 1 a.m. Hours passed as Nicole got into deep slumber and didn't even get aware of the upwelling thunderstorm outside, as heavy rain can be heard while lightning flashes. But then she suddenly wakes up by a deep meow and shakes her head as she thought that it was only thunder. She tries to close her eyes again, but immediately reopens them when she hears him meow another time. She looks around, trying to find where it came from, but only stumbles upon her damaged pillow that lays beside her and Richard's casual clothing, indicating that he's sleeping on the couch. The shock in her body returns when she analyzes the sound. It wasn't a normal meow. Not the brief call of the neighbor's cat that got itself stuck somewhere again, but a low-pitched rough meow that Nicole hasn't heard in a long time. The same meow as when she ended the life of her previous nemesis. Meow! The upper limits! She screams in thoughts. She then gasps out loud when she hears another voice responding. A voice inside her head. The upper limit indeed. Missed me? What? Who are you? You don't remember? Silly, you just said it yourself. Gosh, you're back to manipulate my thoughts, aren't you? Oh well, feisty today, I see. I'm fed up with you. I don't even care if I'm you, but you're making me sick. Literally as well. I did not spawn in your thoughts to hear you complaining. Then what the heck do you want from me? Just making sure we're alive. Ugh, barely in this way. Yeah, I noticed. Nicole looks at her paws and then stares at how parts of her ribcage are visible through her shirt. We appear to be hungry, darling. Ugh, stop it! You're the cause of this. Why can't I get some rest? 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 Are you kidding? Rest will only let you collapse by yourself. What? You weakling! No wonder why I need to take control of you more often. Look at the state of you. Look how starved you are. There are needs to be fulfilled to stay alive, cat. You know how sick eating made me. And what do you mean with needs? Survival. Have you really forgotten what you are? I am a cat. I am a mother with 3 loving kids. I'm the other half of my loving husband and— No! You don't get it. You were already disgusted with yourself before you were a strike. I knew you couldn't handle it on your own. What do you mean? What do you expect from me? Handle what? Your prey, gosh darn it! It was right in front of you. What? My son is not prey! Nicole quickly rises up and holds her head tightly as a heavy headache starts acting up. The blue feline feels that she's in need of calming down and decides to grab a glass of water. Like she attempted many times before, she silently walks into the kitchen and lets water run down the faucet. Her eyes inspect everything around her that gets brightened up at times by the lightning outside. It seems like the thunderstorm is getting worse, but she thinks her kids and husband are sound asleep. After downing a glass and putting it back on the countertop, her stomach suddenly cramps heavily again. She didn't expect this and falls onto her knees while her claws scratch the wood of the kitchen cabinets. She bends over and holds her head while panting quickly. What a coincidence when Darwin just made his way downstairs to grab a glass of water as well. He woke up by the thunderstorm. That wasn't fortunate for him, as he was sleeping lightly already. He gasps when he encounters his mother on the kitchen floor and slowly approaches her. He doesn't know whether to run back upstairs or help, as he is too worried about her. Nicole still holds her head tightly and starts groaning heavily. Her agony is becoming uncontainable as she bends her back a bit. This causes most of her spine to get exposed a bit through her shirt, and Darwin almost shrieks in shock. He stands next to her and forces himself to speak up after a lightning strike illuminated the room. "Mrs. Mom? Are you alright?" No answer comes from the blue feline as she suffers too much. Her fangs start elongating, and to Darwin's horror, the back of her shirt rips as the cat's appearance changes. Darwin starts panicking by the fact there isn't any medicine around, and suddenly stays standing still when he realizes Nicole hasn't moved much yet. She, now having taken the form of a upper limit stage, is still curled up in the same position and suddenly starts sobbing. Darwin's sensitivity immediately gets triggered, and his fear decreases a bit when he hears her crying. So he hops closer and hugs her, wrapping his fins around her until she seems like calming down. But he gasps when she suddenly snarls and realizes those aren't tears of grief, but insanity. He quickly releases her as she rises up, and he gasps when he hears the cat's stomach hungrily growling, indicating he is doomed. He jumps backwards when the blue feline gets on all fours and still towers above him. More terrified than he was ever before, he sprints into the living room and tries to escape from the vicious blue monster that has taken the place of his adoptive mother. She snarls every time she pounces, but Darwin manages to dodge her attacks. He, being extremely lucky at this moment with his well-developed legs, manages to outrun his demise, but fears he won't keep up forever. He jumps behind the couch, where his adoptive father was sleeping earlier, and Bud went upstairs. Darwin tries to hide behind it, and can hear where the paws of the blue feline touch the floor as she continues looking for him. He almost wanted to sigh in relief when he heard her being near the stairs, but his hope is destroyed when she starts sniffling her nose. Chapter 15. Feral Control. Gumball gasps when he hears a noise he didn't expect and got woken up by it. He rises up and throws his legs over the border of the bunk, getting out of his bed. He turns his head and sees Anais sleeping tightly with Daisy snuggled up to her. Deciding to let her sleep, he makes his way downstairs on his own, not being aware of the ongoing disaster. Darwin's heart pounds heavier as he hears his adoptive mother's deep breathing getting closer. She has gone insane. Not a single bit of her is recognizable, neither her monstrous appearance nor vicious behavior. The blue cat, controlled by the evil force, follows her ancestors' instinctive objective, maintaining nutrition. The first thing Gumball tries to avoid when he got downstairs is gasping as he cannot believe what he sees. His mother is violently approaching Darwin, whose hiding spot behind the couch just got discovered. Without thinking twice, he runs towards his feral mother and blocks her path to Darwin. Gumball holds his paws in front of him and pushes his adoptive brother aside with his hips, while signing that he needs to get out of there. "What were you doing? Get away from Darwin!" Gumball then falls backwards, only to feel a combination of anger and fear rising within him when his savage mother's face gets really close to his. After having a short moment of surprise by her other son suddenly getting involved, the monstrous blue cat does nothing but growling while her ears droop again. Gumball, realizing he put himself into danger, immediately wants to escape, but the fact he wouldn't allow Darwin to get hurt makes him hesitate from getting away. He then sees Nicole turning her head, while still having Gumball in between her front paws and looking at the cowering Darwin. He made his way under the curtains and keeps his eyes covered with his fins. Gumball gets angered when his mother visibly starts giving in to her instincts again as saliva continues dripping from her mouth. The little blue feline frowns and grabs his mother's head, only to stop her from staring at Darwin. His eyes widen, and he isn't even afraid of the two glowing yellow ones in front of him. Gosh darn it, Mom! I don't understand! How can you get so enraged to release your Polymer form out of a sudden? The big blue feline aggressively releases her head from her son's paws and pushes his chest down with hers. Gumball shrieks out of pain, caused by his mother's long claws that make their way through his sweater. He then stares into her eyes, and a terrifying grin appears on her snout after she let out a menacingly deep meow. What? First Darwin? Now you're gonna eat me too? Nicole hisses and tries to reach for her son's neck with her teeth, but he manages to push her head away from him and hits her nose. Her pupils constrict further, as he clearly hit a sensitive spot, and she immediately bites his right paw. Gumball screams it out in agony and pants in terror when he sees blood running down his mother's jaws. He pulls his arm towards him, releasing his paw from her teeth, and sees that a horrible bite mark got left on it. His eyes tear up, and his fright eventually makes him want to crawl away, but he can't move as his mother keeps her strong paws pressed on his chest. Darwin can't handle seeing his brother in danger and ignores the fact that he told him to get away. He is lucky to notice Richard appearing on top of the stairs with Anais in his arms. Having the same reaction as Gumball had earlier, he runs downstairs and Darwin immediately hugs Anais tightly after she got put down again. Richard uses his rabbit paws to jump and tries his best to be as fast as possible. Nicole, no! Nicole gets disoriented by her husband's sudden call and gets off Gumball, who immediately joins his siblings in fright while keeping his wound covered. Gumball can't stop sobbing. She bit me. The three kids hug each other, while they cower from the violence in front of them. Richard grabs his savage wife before she can make any violent moves, and tries to hold her still with all his might. Kids, I need your help! Grab anything metal that is strong enough to tie her up. The three jump up and obey their father without having any doubts. Anais opens all the cabinets she can reach in the kitchen, while Darwin rushes into the basement. Gumball managed to reach the shed in the backyard as quickly as possible, but soon realizes he and his siblings can't find anything useful. After Anais and Darwin gathered with Gumball at the shed, the blue kitten suddenly gets a rather extreme idea. We might not have a choice than locking her up in this. What? Have you seen how strong she gets in this state? She'd break free in less than a second, says Anais. We could bend the soles around her limbs or something? Another what? Do you really want to torture our mother like that? We're out of aethers, Anais, says Darwin. There's no other option, unless you have a better idea? Anais looks at Gumball, who covers his wound again as it continues bleeding. I got nothing, says Anais. Then there's no time to lose. Gumball screams from the top of his lungs to call his father, who manages to get Nicole in the shed as soon as he entered the backyard. Gumball and Darwin help their father by tightly holding each of Nicole's trembling paws, and Richard bends the 4 slimmest saws he has. No matter how badly they don't want to do this, the boys' fear got the best of them. Gumball locks his mother's left wrist under a bent saw and ties it to the wooden floorboards of the shed. Gumball tears up. We're so sorry, Mom, but there's no other way. Gumball's heart sinks in grief when her arm jerks due to the pain by the saw's sharp end stabbing through her fur. She widens her eyes and roars when Darwin locks her other wrist as well. The boys then back away, and the blue feline clearly can't go anywhere anymore, and they cannot handle hearing her screams of anger and agony. Richard grits his teeth and shuts the door, only to lean with his back against it as he refuses to lock it. We're going way too far. This is no good. What else are we supposed to do? Getting us killed? Says Gumball. But you unfortunately don't have any chains laying around, and Mom's been chained up lots of times, don't you think? Says Anais. Saws aren't any better, says Richard. I can't believe those are the only strong metal objects we have. But Dad, if she's bully-proof, she can handle this, says Anais. But doesn't this hurt her way more, says Darwin. Richard sighs. She already goes through an extreme amount of continuous pain. I just don't understand, says Gumball. I thought this form of her only gets triggered when she's angry? There is more to it than you know, son. I actually wish you three didn't have to witness any of it. So, that means she transforms at random times? How is that possible? Asks Anais. Is there some sort of voice in her head that controls it? Jokes aren't funny now, sis, says Gumball. I'm being serious. This condition is supernatural and has a big amount of possibilities. But a voice? She's not possessed. No. I know she isn't. But do glowing eyes and enlarging teeth really make more sense to you than a possible evil thought manipulating force? But we've seen those eyes and teeth before, even in the supermarket, before it got to this extreme. Yeah, the supermarket was the very beginning for the terror that started to unfold after Mom's first murder. Gosh, a supermarket. Just imagine how it could have been without a vent, says Richard. The past isn't changeable, Dad, says Anais. Even Mom eventually didn't have a choice, but accepting it happened. Then how do you explain her ongoing grief and self-hatred then? Dad, it are the murders that haunt her. Don't you think that feeling is understandable in that case? No, I mean, of course I understand. But I don't see her accepting anything that has happened before as well. Dad, could you possibly be reflecting your own feelings? Says Anais. What? Gumball and Darwin turn to their father, who tears up a bit. Dad, how do you feel about the situation? Anais, you know very well I'm terrified. I even thought she was gonna eat me someday. Then why do you think Mom hasn't lost her guilt from the supermarket incident yet? Richard stays silent and looks at the grass. Do you possibly feel guilty about the incident? Richard's eyes widen as he remembers Nicole had snapped because of his behavior and the fact he was the one she chased after. He shakes his head and doesn't want to answer his daughter's question. Of course he feels guilty, but he does not get the chance to speak up when Nicole suddenly dashes against the door. Richard has to hold it shut tightly and wonders how she released herself so quickly. Darwin runs to the window of the shed and sees that the saws broke in pieces. Some parts of them are still stuck in the paws of the now even more furious feline. Blood streams from the open wounds, but the pain doesn't seem to sedate her at all. Chapter 16. Authoritative Help. Nicole regains some of her strength out of upwelling fury, as her being tied up only made things worse. She scratches the door with her claws, or trying her best to bust it open with her weight, and Richard struggles to prevent her from getting out. Darwin runs back to the windows and immediately calls the emergency helpline. What are you doing, dude? You're gonna get arrested, says Gumball. We're still out of options, Gumball. Gumball, chill, says Anais. The cops know what Mom deals with, and I'm sure they'll understand that the lack of ethos wasn't our fault. Remember, Mr. Warrington is in contact with the police. Well, if you say so. But doesn't that mean the $100 fine of Tobias's dad is the cause of this? Gosh, you're right! We shouldn't have lost that money. Better tell it to the cops as well, then. Anais nods, and Darwin hangs up after successfully making his call. The three make their father aware of the fact away, and they all seem to calm a bit down. They notice it stopped raining, and the clearer starry sky indicates that it would have been outside for most of the night. While they wait patiently, Anais takes her chance to grab some bandage for Gumball, who suddenly covers his wound again once it ached another time. Gumball holds the end of it near the wound, while Anais wraps the rest around his paw. He smiles gratefully at his sister, who shortly after makes her family aware of the cops that have arrived. The donut sheriff gets in the yard by Darwin, followed by 2 other officers with tasers to protect themselves and Erin Warrington to the Watterson's surprise. The cops gather around Richard and the shed, and then Erin takes a step forward to speak up. Even if it has been some months, the Watterson father still recognizes the raven humanoid from the first appointment. "Greetings, Mr. Watterson. I usually would have been really happy to see you, but I am really sorry this eventually happened again," says Erin. "It's okay, sir. The only reason it got out of hand again is the fact that we don't have enough money for the Aether's herb, actually." "Oh dear! Now excuse me, sir, but may I ask why you or your wife hasn't contacted me once you ran out? You know it's the most important promise that had to be made in order to cut corners on your wife's punishment, right?" "Yes, and I'm terribly sorry. A lot has been going on, and we simply didn't think about it enough." "No matter how much I understand that, you must realize it's an extreme risk that you've been taking. Both you and your children, but also for her." "Wait, what? I apologize for not being informed enough about this condition, but is she at risk as well?" "You didn't know?" says Erin. "I guess there is no better moment than informing you now, then." Richard, who still stays standing with his back against the shed's door, nods and gulps. Erin takes a sheet from his shoulder bag and lets Richard look at the registered information on it. However, the pink bunny manages to get the good glance from the printed words. He is glad Erin is about to elaborate. "You might or might not have seen what incredibly high tension builds up in your wife's body as soon as she transforms. Well, even though we know very little about the overall condition, if this tension gets too high, her blood pressure could exceed what her body can handle. This would have massive vine rending as consequence, leading to nothing but disease." Richard can't think of any words to say. His guilt starts rising more until he feels a bit sick. He doesn't owe for triggering Nicole's condition, but also her possible death. He visibly starts freaking out, and sweat runs down his forehead. Erin luckily notices this and knows how to reassure him. "But before you panic, remember this is only what could happen. At its ultimate worst point, the Aether is strong enough to prevent it, but I hope you understand that she'll have to continue taking it in regularly." "I completely understand. Thank you for informing me, though, and I will keep my heads up not to make the same mistake again." "No worries. We try our best to learn as much about this condition as possible, hoping your wife will eventually get a grip on it. I will make sure your insurance documents get adjusted in order you won't have to worry about running out of the medicine again," says Erin. The Raven and Richard nod, and the kids slowly get closer again. But as soon as Anais wanted to check how her father is doing, she gets stopped by the donut sheriff, indicating the current matter hasn't been taken care of yet. "Now stand back, Mr. Watterson," says Erin. "I have a brand new package of Aethers with me, and we need to calm her down as quickly as possible." "I'm not sure if I can leave this door yet," says Richard. Richard moves his feet, and in doing so awakens the whirlwind of fury within the blue feline that had laid down earlier. How she was pulling the pieces of sore out of her paws and licking her wounds, she now has gotten reminded of the prey from the other side of the door and once again dashes against it. This immediately motivates Erin and Richard to change position, and the blue cat races towards the raven's wing feathers once the door wasn't blocked anymore. Richard, afraid his wife would do the same to Erin as she had done to him before, jumps in and pulls her off Erin by her ankles. She, getting rather disoriented by the new figures that entered the garden, violently claws around while releasing terrifying snarls. Erin takes his chance and sticks a leaf of the herb in between her teeth once Richard managed to keep her head still. The raven then straightens his back and knocks the dust off his shoulders. The pink bunny turns his passed out wife around and gently keeps holding her in his arms. However, her fangs shrink quickly, her fur softens itself, and she decreases in size again. Richard sees how exhausted she is again. He is heartbroken by the fact that what they both thought they had defeated only started yet.